I've made a video of any kind, but I'm sitting in my car ranting at myself because of how fucking pissed I am. So figured I might as well just film it. So a lot of people these days will say that if you don't support Ukraine surrendering to Russia, you oppose peace. Well, let's talk about peace. What do you mean by peace? If what you mean by peace is Russia gets to do whatever it wants to, call a timeout, regroup, come back in a year and do whatever it wants to again, then yeah, I oppose peace. Any decent person opposes peace if that's what peace means. If what you mean by peace is a situation where the sovereignty of both nations is involved, is respected, and Russia leaves Ukraine permanently, whether that is by being forced out by Ukraine and its allies, or if that is by a negotiated settlement where Ukraine gets protection, where Russia never gets to attack it again. If that's what you mean by peace, then yeah, I support peace. Because not just in this war, not just in modern history, not in any particular context, in the general context of humanity, the only way to have a true peace is if you are willing to commit incredible violence against those who breach that peace. If you aren't willing to do that, then the people who want to use violence to do whatever the fuck they want to take whatever the fuck they want to, are gonna do it. The only way to stop them is to be willing to respond to their violence with even more overwhelming violence. And that is why Ukraine should either be given the tools to push Russia the fuck out of its country, or at the very least, bare minimum, if it's going to give up what it's already lost and just write it off, it needs to be given a guarantee that if Russia ever does this to them again, incredible violence will be used against Russia to stop them. That is how you have an actual, just, and lasting peace. It is not peace to surrender to the attacker. Advocating surrendering to the attacker is in fact being pro-war. Because by giving the attacker what they want for nothing, you are only encouraging more war. And some people, some very fucking stupid people, but some people might object to my use of attacker to refer to Russia. That's because these people are, as mentioned, very fucking stupid. They like to argue that Russia was provoked by Ukraine into attacking and trying to conquer it. What possible provocation would justify, did Ukraine attack Russia? Was Ukraine was Ukraine funding terrorism against Russia the way that Russia was funding terrorism against Ukraine? Was Ukraine secretly sending troops into parts of Russia to take away pieces of it, as Russia did to Ukraine? No. What they mean when they say that Ukraine provoked Russia is that Ukraine wants to be allies with and do business with the West. And Ukraine is a sovereign country. It can be allies with and do business with whoever the fuck it wants to. If Mexico wanted to be allied with Russia and do business with Russia, that would not give the United States the right to invade and conquer Mexico. Anyone proposing that did give the United States the right to do that would very obviously be seen as a fucking warmonger who hates peace. But for some reason, we've lost our goddamn heads when it comes to Russia, And they can use that same justification. And it's I'm so sorry that you got provoked by Ukraine wanting to be friends with people other than you after you keep threatening them. Oh, I'm so sorry, poor Russia. It's fucking absurd. That's why I say these people are very fucking stupid. There's no... If you buy that narrative of Ukraine provoked Russia, you are very fucking stupid. You do not deserve the respect of being talked to as an equal by people who don't do that bullshit. You do not deserve that respect. Become less fucking stupid, and then maybe you will deserve that respect. There is one grievance Russia has that is very, very legitimate, but it's not with Ukraine. It's with the United States. After Nazi Germany fell, we treated West Germany very, very well. Obviously, the people that were directly involved in war crimes, we rightly tried and executed. But everyone else, even people complicit in the Nazi regime, outright supportive of the Nazi regime, we didn't care. We rebuilt their country. We destroyed their country, bombed it, so we rebuilt it. We gave them the dignity of a defeated enemy, and we invested in their economy and helped them get on their feet. That's what you should do with a defeated enemy that you don't want to have to fight again. Not only is it the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. After the Soviet Union fell, we did not do that. We instead of giving them a Marshall Plan, we gave Russia shock therapy, which is basically a fancy term for we talked their most corrupt government officials into selling off their assets for pennies on the dollar. And that's a very legitimate grievance. A lot of the conditions, like the bad conditions in Russia, that Russia has today, grew out of that soil. The dictatorship of Vladimir Putin grew out of that soil. America did have a big role in causing Russia to be the shithole that it is today. But America not helping Russia the way we should have does not then give Russia the right to invade a totally other country and try to conquer it. Any attempt to connect those things as a valid into a valid casus belli is again very fucking stupid. But some people they don't even bother with trying to argue Russia was just or fair in attacking Ukraine or any of this other shit. Some of them on the far right, they'll just say that Russia is this based Christian nation that should be supported because of how based and Christian and trad it is. Russia is not a Christian nation, okay? Russia has a single-digit rate of weekly church attendance. America has a 35% rate of weekly church attendance. And while it's true that that's self-reported, and our church attendance is probably lower than what's self-reported, the 7% for Russia is self-reported as well, and that's also probably over-reported. So comparing self-reported data to self-reported data, I think, is fair. A pretty similar rate of people in both countries call themselves Christians. About 70% in America, about 70% in Russia, but only 20% of Russian Christians say that God is very important to them, whereas 80% of American Christians say that God is very important to them. And look, we're all sinners, right? I try not to judge other people's Christianity too harshly, but if you can't say that God is very important to you, you aren't a fucking Christian, all right? Theoretically, ideally, God should be the most important to you. Not many of us live up to that. I almost certainly don't. But if you can't at least say that God is very important to you, you're not a Christian. I'm sorry. Ridiculous to say that God isn't very important to you and say that you're a Christian. So, America, a secular nation, is vastly more of a Christian nation than Russia. And it's not Russia isn't a particularly traditional nation either. They're a bunch of fucking heroin addicts, okay? Like, far be it from me to criticize someone's drug use, but being a heroin addict ain't exactly trad, alright? They're a deeply atheistic and a deeply, as the right-wingers who lionize them would say, degenerate nation that just happens to hate gay people a lot. That's all it is. There's no reason to regard Russia as a Christian nation unless what Christianity means to you is that the more you hate gay people, the more Christian you are. There's no other reason to regard modern Russia as a Christian nation. And speaking of Christianity, let's take a look at the war from a Christian lens. Let's talk some Christian just war theory, okay? There's two components to this. There's just cause for war, and there's just conduct in war. As far as just cause for war, we've got 5 concepts. We've got just reason. For Ukraine, that reason is self-defense. They were invaded. For Russia, it's they want to conquer another country. I'm going to put who has the just reason in the Ukraine column on this one. Okay? Are you with me so far? Self-defense is the more just reason than wanting to conquer another country? Okay. So then a very similar related concept, just intent. Ukraine's intent is to restore its territorial sovereignty and have a lasting peace where they are not subject to further conquest by Russia. Russia's intent is to exploit the territory and people that it conquers. Again, and this might be contentious, but I think I'm going to give this fucking W to the Ukraine column as well in terms of just intent. Okay? So, third concept, proper authority, that's a wash. Both sides of the war are being led by the recognized government of their respective nations. Proper authority really only comes into play when you're dealing with non-state actors. So maybe the actions of like Wagner PMC, that could come into play as not having proper authority, but they're being ordered by the government of Russia. So just to make it easy, we'll say that both are operating proper authority in a Christian just war theory context. So that one's a wash. So then, war is last resort. Well, Ukraine didn't have any other resorts because they were invaded. Once you're invaded, all of your other resorts have been taken away from you by the invader. Russia, on the other hand, had infinite options of how to deal with its grumbles with Ukraine because Ukraine was not getting ready to invade Russia. Russia had the time and initiative. Ukraine did not. So again, it's looking like on the matter of last resort, Ukraine is acting justly and Russia is not. So this one is going to be actually controversial. Sarcasm, my incredible sarcasm aside. Possibility of victory. So many people will say that Ukraine has no possibility of victory. Russia has the only possibility of victory. So if that were true, it still wouldn't make Russia's war a just war, because to have a just cause for war, you have to meet all 5 in Christian just war theory. It's not just, 2's good. No, it's all 5. So Russia's war is not just either way. But what about Ukraine? Well, do they have that 5th thing of possibility of victory? Reasonable possibility of victory. Now, that isn't probably winning. That isn't certainly winning. Any reasonable possibility of victory is what this pillar calls for. And I think that, and a lot of people go way back with arguing for Ukraine on this one. They'll say, well, in 1776, things weren't looking great for the American revolutionaries, but they won. And that's true. It's a good historical example. But I don't think we need to go all that far back. I think What we need to look at is the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, done by just a stronger version of Russia against a weaker force than the Ukrainian army. Okay? And after 9 years, what happened? Russia was kicked the fuck out of Afghanistan, and they had blown so much money on the war that the Soviet Union stopped existing a few years later. So people who are anti-Ukraine will say, oh, there's no chance of victory, no chance whatsoever, as if they treat it like it's some pie in the sky idea when we talk about how Russia is hurting economically. They're a third-rate economic power that's having to spend like a superpower to sustain this war, and they can't sustain it forever. They act like that's some pie-in-the-sky idea, like some utopian vision of Ukrainian victory, when it's just how the Soviet Union ended fucking 40 or 30 years ago. Like, I was born in 1994, the Soviet Union fell in 1991, so not quite within my lifetime, but within my older brother's lifetime, all of my older siblings' lifetimes, that went down. This isn't some ancient history, okay? A stronger version of Russia collapsed because of the expense of fighting a weaker enemy than Ukraine. The Mujahideen did not have HIMARS, okay? So let's put this idea that it's impossible for Ukraine to win into the not necessarily very fucking stupid box, like the idea that Russia's justified, but into the pretty fucking stupid box, okay? So Ukraine meets all 5 of the Christian just war theory bases for a just cause for war, where Russia meets only one, proper authority. Or I suppose 2, because it does have Russia also has a reasonable chance of victory. You could even say that Russia will probably win, but both have a reasonable chance of victory if Ukraine is supported by the West. So, just cause for war in a Christian context obviously goes to Ukraine. What about just conduct in war? Well, this is a bit shorter, right? So, we've got discrimination between combatants and non-combatants, and proportionate response to violence. So in discrimination between combatants and non-combatants, almost all of the war has been fought in Ukraine, so it's not as though Ukrainian forces have encountered very many, comparatively speaking, very many enemy non-combatants, right? But where they have encountered them in Kursk, the conduct of Ukraine's military has been to occupy the area, repair infrastructure, help out the locals, fix their plumbing. You know, very good hearts and minds, PR soldier behavior. Whereas Russia's conduct on meeting Ukrainian civilians has been to hunt them for sport and to rape them en masse. So I'm gonna say that in terms of discriminating between combatants and non-combatants, Ukraine is the one doing that. You might say that Russia discriminates between combatants and non-combatants in that they treat non-combatants much worse because they can get away with it and they won't return fire. But I don't think that counts for meeting the Christian just war idea of discriminating between combatants and non-combatants. So then proportionality of violence. Russia initiated all violence and has leveled cities and has hunted civilians for sport. And Ukraine has only responded to violence and has not at any point been nearly as violent as Russia. So I would say that Ukraine's response has been better than proportionate. It has been way better than Russia's. So, even if you want to look at geopolitics through who's the most Christian, Russia's not a Christian nation, and their war is not a Christian war. Ukraine, I don't know the data on church going in Ukraine. Maybe they're like the U.S., maybe they're like Russia. I don't know. But if you want to look at the war through a Christian context, Ukraine is fighting a just war, and Russia is not. So if you want to look at things through like a humanist, secular perspective, Russia is violating the sovereignty of another nation and mass murdering civilians. If you want to look at things through a Christian perspective, Russia is fighting an unjust war from a Christian perspective too. There is no reason to support Russia other than you are very fucking stupid or very fucking evil. Or both. I think a lot of you are both that support Russia. None of you will see heaven's light. I don't know. I don't know if you'll see heaven's light or not, but you're gonna see purgatory's fires first, if so.